Greetings, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to another episode of Beyond the Rainbow Books. Today, we'll be reading Chapter 3, Billy Bean, Going the Other Way. Life lessons learned from in and out of Major League Baseball. Let's get started. During my senior year in 1982, the letters started showing up in the mail, bearing the emblems of USC, UCLA, and Cal State Fullerton, to name just a few sports powerhouses. The schools were offering full ride 4-year scholarships. Since I was still considered undersized to play football, it was the baseball programs that were expressing interest. These opportunities were what I dreamed about. It had been hard to believe this could actually happen, and I can't say I was prepared. I'd never imagined it could be this way or this easy. It was only later that people told me that the combination of my 3.8 grade point average and my collection of varsity letters made me an ideal college recruit. No one in my family had attended college. To the extent she thought about it, Mom probably assumed I'd become a cop like my stepfather. It was a secure job with a steady income, benefits, and a chance to help others. Fearing the coaches might change their minds about the scholarships, they pushed me to accept the first offer. Today, athletes spend more time weighing their options with a battalion of paid advisors, coaches, and family members. They recognize and negotiate terms with schools, laying the groundwork for a lucrative professional career. But we quickly settled on Loyola Marymount University, a strict Jesuit school in Los Angeles, an hour's drive up the highway from home. Marv Wood, a heavy-set man who spoke in complete sentences, did not fit the image of a head baseball coach at a major university. He contacted me after the Orange County High School All-Star game, where I went 2 for 2 with 3 runs batted in and pitched the South team to victory. The next day, he called and invited us up for a visit. Mom, Ed, and I were impressed with campus. Acres of well-tended lawns fanned out from a turn-of-the-century chapel, and the spring sun made it all glow. My parents were sold. They felt comfortable with the school's religious underpinning and academic emphasis. Ed said it was better to be a big fish in a little pond than risk getting lost at a large program like USC or UCLA. Deep down, they still didn't think my future was on the diamond. I wasn't so sure. I had to admit there was much to like about Loyola. For one thing, I was fascinated by the pretty young women I saw sometimes sauntering around the campus in shorts and tank tops, books slung casually under their arms. I was even more turned on by the 3,000-seat baseball stadium under construction, a development that went a long way toward allying with allaying my concern about the school's underachieving sports program. Wood appealed directly to my healthy ego, saying that I could be the cornerstone of a team he was determined to transform into an NCAA Division I contender. He seconded Ed's point that young players can get lost in the shuffle of the bigger programs. He assured me I would start in center field as a freshman. Billy, he said, you could take us to the top. Upper middle class kids from private Catholic high schools, mostly in Southern California, dominated the student body. They wore designer brands, drove brand new cars, and had pretty much anything they wanted. Then there was a bunch of scruffy athletes admitted only because they'd won scholarships. My rickety '69 Volkswagen stood out in the sea of BMWs and Saabs that crowded the parking lot. When I walked into my room in the freshman dorm, a friendly giant greeted me. Tim Leana was a strapping right-hander who had been drafted by the Chicago White Sox out of Loyola High. He had followed the advice of his uncle, former major leaguer Jim McEnany. Despite having gone to the World Series with the Sox in 1959, Jim counseled his talented nephew to get a college education before thinking about the pros. At first, I found it difficult to relate to Tim. He was your typical athlete, seemingly without a care in the world, while I was already serious about too many things. I had barely unpacked when Tim and another ball player, Damian Bonenfant, were giving me a hard time. Loosen up, Bean, they would say in unison. Won't kill you to have a few beers. A few beers had a way of turning into a six-pack, then two. Then anything could happen. They wanted to party every night. I couldn't decide whether to succumb or isolate myself from the temptations. Half Spanish and half Irish, Tim came from a large, outgoing Catholic family. His mother, Carol, was a saint. We affectionately called their home, just 10 minutes from campus, Leanna Land, because it was a popular stop for many wayward youths. Even I lived there one off season. Tim was a man among boys. He had dark hair, brown eyes, and a 5 o'clock shadow, even after shaving. He wore a baseball hat even in his sleep, and he always had a tobacco chew between his cheek and gums, staining his teeth yellow. He was a total slob, never wore clean clothes, and had the manners of a farting, belching teenager. We became the Felix and Oscar of college ball, but underneath the jocular exterior, I soon discovered a sweet and even vulnerable guy, and it wasn't long before we were inseparable. He had a preternatural calm about him, the perfect makeup for a pitcher and friend. Treating school like a pit stop to the majors, he slept through classes and never worried where he inevitably fell behind. For a worrywart like me, it was a relief to go through life next to a guy like this. I never stopped cracking up around him, and when I was stressed out about a test score or a slump, his very presence put everything in perspective. While Tim was the class clown and team cut up, I became Mother Bean, as he liked to call me. I tried to keep him out of harm's way as best I could. We began preparing for a spring season about 2 weeks into the fall. Though I missed the variety of high school sports, it was a luxury to be able to focus on one. I expected to battle for playing time. Instead, it immediately became clear that Marv had simply anointed Bean and Leanna as the program's saviors. The returning team had heard quite a bit about us, and they were understandably resentful. After all, we hadn't even stepped on the field yet. The guys we barely met were hearing about our prowess. I'd often assumed that my own only obstacles were on the field, the me against the other guy philosophy. But the further along I got, the more I realized that was only half of it. The mental and social aspects of the game ruled. The attitude of your teammates is as crucial to your performance as the way you swing the bat or throw the ball. I would have to earn my teammates' respect, and it wasn't going to be as easy as getting a bunch of hits. By the time I'd filled out in high school, it had been too late to contemplate the big league draft. My underdog image as an undersized working class kid who happened to become a ball player made it difficult for me to imagine making the big leagues. Despite my youthful boasts to Mom, at Loyola, that attitude was starting to crumble. Tim, who had the quiet self-assurance of all great athletes, encouraged me to think big. Since he'd already been drafted and had a major league family background, he didn't see pro ball as out of his reach. He felt as we were destined for the bigs even before we'd ever achieved anything. He would state that he was going to throw a shutout and strike out 10 batters. And then go out and do it. His energy rubbed off, and soon we were setting some lofty goals. I started thinking how I might make it happen, thanks to the coaching I'd received at the lower levels. I had sound fundamentals on which to build. George C. Page Stadium featured a high left field wall that was a collegiate version of Fenway Park's Green Monster. But the wall was far shorter than in right, my natural power field. I hoped to send a few more shots the other way over that wall, as well as into the giant eucalyptus trees that towered just beyond the center and right field fence. I was never going to be a slugger like Chris Donnells, who would become my roommate in the fall of 1984. At 19, he already had huge shoulders and forearms. He effortlessly stroked 21 homers, mostly the opposite way over the monster, a school record. Knowing that college pitchers would probably add 5 miles per hour to average fastballs and several inches of break to curves, I spent countless hours in the batting cage fine-tuning my swing long after everyone else had gone home. Watching Daniel's raw power and Leanna's rocket arm taught me a lesson. While I may well have been the better all-around player, I lacked a tool, the single shining skill, power stroke, blinding speed, rocket arm that I could ride to the majors. Leanna's fastball, which he maintained no matter how many beers he downed or how many women he chased the night before, was a gift from God I'd been denied. I'd have to keep developing every aspect of my game if I were to make the ultimate leap. My best bet was to pattern myself after a guy like George Brett, then tearing it up Kansas City Royals. Brett was a solid third baseman. He had a little pop, but most of all, he was one of the best line drive hitters around, one of those guys who could hit 300 in his sleep. I'd even seen Fred Lynn play as a little leaguer. Like Brett, he could scorch the ball to all fields and batter the fences when he got hot, carrying his teammates along for the ride. If I could hit anywhere near 300 in the bigs, I had a feeling I'd be well on my way toward a long, not to mention lucrative, career. I may have been at a Jesuit school where the priests taught abstinence until marriage, but the good fathers would have been shocked at what was going on in the dorms just across the lawn from the chapel. I marveled at Catholic kids who'd get stoned on Sunday afternoon and then meander to the chapel for 6 o'clock mass. Students scoffed at the prescription of premarital sex, and the athletes I bunked with were getting laid pretty regularly. Religious notions about sex were a big joke, and we chased it with the zeal of linebackers rushing a quarterback, even though AIDS appeared on the horizon my freshman year. I don't remember anyone mentioning it ever. Leanna was determined to lead me down the primrose path. He didn't have to pull me very hard. I felt ready to explore what I sublimated to sports. We spent a lot of time hanging out at the local tavern or just drinking with Damien and as many girls as we could squeeze into our room. After I'd been cajoled into going out, we would spend a few hours gathering the babes and bring them back to our room. My first sexual experience at Loyola was a shared one with Tim in a gorgeous freshman co-ed. We laughed and high-fived each other all the way back to my own dormitory room. The next morning, I worried about the girl, but she wanted it just as bad as we did, Tim retorted with a big grin. Girls gravitated to me, even though Tim worked harder at it. So in a reprise of my grade school efforts to win approval, I'd lure them back to our room with funny stories or a chance to just hang. And then at the last moment, I'd defer to Tim and sneak out of the room. When it came to women, my teammates loved to exaggerate their exploits. I found myself curiously detached from this behavior, and I always felt like an intruder into their erotic world. I wanted to remain close to them, and playing along seemed the best way to do that. Our escapades built us a reputation before we'd even played a game that counted. Despite the partying, I came into my own in my junior year, catching everything hit my way in right field, swiping bases, and hitting over 400. I was selected for the Division One All-America team. I finally caught the attention of big league scouts. There was talk I could go as high as the first 2 or 3 rounds of the draft. The team was gelling too. For the first time in years, we finished with a winning record. We were one recruiting class away from becoming a national contender. Near the end of the season, I was standing on third base when Dave Snow, our new head coach, called for a suicide squeeze. I broke for the plate just as the batter missed the bunt attempt. When I reversed course, my cleat stuck in the dirt infield, tearing my right quadriceps muscle. It felt like someone had struck a knife in my thigh, and I lay in the baseline writhing in agony as the third baseman put the tag on. With one play, we had lost more than the game. In a sport where a tenth of a second in the 60-yard dash can make or break a career, the injury dropped my stock. The Yankees, who had once considered taking me early in the draft, waited till the middle rounds. But after haggling all summer, they offered a $60,000 signing bonus plus performance incentives. Even though it was moderate by baseball standards, this windfall would have been a lot of money for a kid whose mother had supported him on a modest salary. The Yankees were hardly the same franchise they had been or would become. Their owner, George Steinbrenner, was not being removed from feuding with his star, Dave Winfield, and the manager's office had a revolving door. The place was a circus. Even so, it was sorely tempting to sign with the storied organization of Ruth, Gehrig, DiMaggio, and Mantle and wear the pinstripes. The Mets drafted Tim in the 5th round. Coach Snow was adamant we return. He argued that we shouldn't pass up an opportunity to finish our studies, get a degree, and play for college World Series contender. He said senior year wouldn't be worth passing up $1 million, let alone a fraction of that amount. If I had an injury-free senior year, he reasoned, my draft stock would only rise. I did look forward to making a run at a national title. Sure, I foresaw a major league career, but even at my cockiest, I knew I needed a backup plan, something a college degree in business administration could help provide. Mom and Ed thought I should accept the Yankees' offer, fearing I might never have another chance at fulfilling my dream and cushioning my financial future. Tim's decision to return made my decision easier after all. He was making the bigger sacrifice. Pitchers are always one throw away from a career-ending arm injury, and the consensus is that they should always take the money and run. Loyola's gain turned out to be Tim's loss. I believe he left his best stuff on the Loyola mound. He pitched 170 innings his senior year, compiling an astonishing 17-2 record. The team took advantage of his tremendous output, but his arm never really recovered from his 4 years as our workhorse. To give us a taste of minor league competition and prepare us for the senior season, Coach Snow sent me, Tim, and Tim's first cousin, Jim McEnany, to play summer ball for the Fairbanks Gold Panthers of the Alaska League. Chris Donnells went to the arch rival North Pole Knicks, a team loaded with future big leaguers: Todd Zyla, Mark Race, Billy Hasselman, Andy Stankiewicz, and Tori Luvulo. Jim Brusk, who would attend Loyola the next year, played for the Matsu Miners. Getting off the plane, I was greeted by a hand painted sign that read, Billy Bean's Alaskan Parents. It didn't take me long to warm to Bob and Sharon Clark. This down to earth couple lived in a modest home about 10 minutes from the stadium in Fairbanks. They showed me to a small but comfortable guest room on the main floor. Bob was a fisherman and a hunter who cooked what he caught. He would take off for 3 days, returning with enough fish for the winter. He prepared 3-inch thick king salmon steaks on the grill, wrapped in bacon, served sizzling hot. Before long, the couple was feeding the feeding the team. Tim and Jim McEnany lived with a deliverance-style family in the woods, where what they called a mysterious fish chowder simmered on the stove every day. It was scary, smelly stuff, so they were always over at my house for meals. My leg injury healed before the sting of falling in the draft order, but the challenge of new competition lifted spirits. High summer in Alaska was cold enough to be winter anywhere else, and it felt like my hands would shatter like an icicle when my bat didn't make solid contact with the ball. Our ballpark was located in downtown Fairbanks, but most of our competitors' fields loomed up in the middle of nowhere, set in a swath of forest where the trees had been logged to make room for a park. The summer light, which never went away, was ideal for baseball. The mosquitoes were so big that they threatened to pick you up and carry you away when they latched onto your skin. The smoking coils erected everywhere to keep them at bay were ineffective, and it was common to see a pack of the buzzing bloodsuckers hard at work on someone's face. I wore 2 long-sleeve shirts not only to stay warm on the field, but also to keep the little buggers from biting me during the games. Repellent served as my aftershave. It was hilarious to watch locals stand stoically as the ball players jumped around, swatting air. Every year, thousands of men came north for logging jobs and to maintain and repair the oil pipeline that ran through the city, bringing energy to the lower 48, as the locals affectionately called the rest of us. This created demand for diversions, strip clubs to bars. Like the oilmen, we were a bunch of overgrown kids in foreign land with little responsibility except to show up at the park at 3 p.m. each day. The social and sexual annex up in Alaska made the Loyola dorm look like a church nursery. Being thrown together with all those guys from other schools seemed to up the partying ante several notches. One of our first nights there, Tim, Jimmy Mack, and I went to a club called Jezebel's. It was early and the action was pretty slow. We set up at a table and ordered beer. Before long, Tim was chatting up a chick. We always made fun of Tim because he had a thing for girls who would never qualify as Victoria's Secret models. This one, however, was quite impressive. Hey guys, this babe digs me, he finally announced to us. Beaner, give me some money so I can buy her some drinks. We knew he'd find some way of screwing it up, but I handed him a 10 spot anyway. A few minutes later, another young woman walked into the bar wearing nothing but a G-string and boots and started dancing to Madonna. We looked around to see the girl Tim had been scamming, dressed in nothing but bikini briefs, her uncovered breasts wriggling in our teammates' faces. It was a classic Leanna moment. I knew all along she was a dancer, he said sheepishly after his lap dance. The local girls competed to snag the biggest stars, most of whom hailed from major colleges around the country. With condoms and afterthought, several of the guys came down with chlamydia, a sexually transmitted disease that I'd never heard of. The guys complained about the burn every time they relieved themselves. I'll never forget one of the first of many 8-hour bus trips from Fairbanks to Anchorage along a road bumpy from permafrost. Everyone stocked up on food and drinks because there was only one stop en route. About halfway there, a player named Vince had to go so badly that he urinated into a cup that he had been drinking from. I watched with amusement as he tried not to spill while the bus lurched and rocked under him. Sitting behind Vince was one of the most committed born again Christians I had ever met. Steve was also one of the fastest runners from home to first. He avoided most of the partying, working hard, and seemed serious about everything. When Vince finished filling the cup, he tried to open the bus window with one hand while holding onto the cup with the other. Watching this drunken juggling act, I had a sense something bad was about to happen. He opened the window about 6 inches and stupidly tried to throw the whole cup through it. Sure enough, the cup ricocheted off the glass, drenching Steve. Steve screamed, leapt from his seat, and jumped on Vince, fists swinging wildly. A melee broke out right there in the bus as it hurled down a two-lane highway at 75 miles per hour. It took about 10 guys and 15 minutes to pull them off of each other. The driver forged into the eerie night sun as if nothing was happening behind him. There were bloody noses, cuts, and scrapes. Luggage was strewn everywhere. My heart went out to Steve, who made the rest of the trip in damp clothing, stinking of ammonia. As usual, I played along as best I could. But watching my teammates carry on like a bunch of adolescents began to make me feel like a babysitter. Since childhood, I'd always been controlled, even fastidious. Mom called her little neat freak and kid with an old soul, descriptions I doubt would have been applied to any of the other guys. I was gradually becoming more observer than participant, a feeling that intensified as the summer wore on. I started to look forward to graduation when I could at least have my own apartment. Didn't big leaguers get their own suites on the road? I tried not to let my attention from my teammates get in the way of my play. After getting off to a slow start and shaking off the lingering effects of my muscle tear, I came on as strong as the Alaskan weather. My batting average dipped under 400 only on the last day of the season when I went 0-4. I was named the team's player of the year. I also came in second in the voting to Mike Scanlon for Alaska League MVP. I entered senior year brimming with confidence. I'd had a stellar junior year that culminated in being drafted by the Yankees. I'd excelled up north. Now the college athletic department was hyping me as a superstar. Dodger manager Tommy Lasorda spoke at our annual hot stove banquet to kick off the season, where he sang my praises as a ball player. Neither of us could have guessed how our paths would cross again just down the freeway at Dodger Stadium. The cover of the Loyola Media Guide featured a full-length photo of me doing my best slugger imitation, glowering at the camera and wielding a big aluminum bat under the headline, "Big Man with a Bat." It was a ridiculously potent shot, and I chuckled at how far I'd come from little Billy Bean, locker room back in junior high. Dave Snow was not about to let any of his returning big men rest on their laurels. A master motivator, he knew instinctively that my ego could get in the way of the team welfare and my own play. The minute a guy thinks he's got the game figured out, he knew is the minute to fall flat on his ass. He ordered us to meet for mandatory aerobics at 6:30 a.m., 3 days a week. Showing up late meant running with him the next day from 5:30 a.m. till class started. Then, completing the aerobics as well, the team resisted this weird idea of fitness training, contending that aerobics is for girls. We already were getting our butts kicked, running drills on the diamond later each day. The first victim of this brutal regimen was our carousing, which made getting up early impossible. Mother Bean managed to get everyone out of bed and out the door Tim and Chris loathed the workouts, but even they had to admit there was a method to Snow's madness. It forced us into the tip-top shape, helped us become more limber and better balanced. It also created an even playing field. Coach wanted to see the rest of the players that he would not coddle Donalds, Leanna, and Bean. We would sacrifice like everyone else. When the season started, I got off to a sluggish start. Fearing my reputation, teams pitched around me, preferring to take their chances with Donalds, who hit in the fourth spot right behind me. Worried the scouts would notice my lack of production, I grew frustrated at my inability to pile up big numbers. I watched Donalds clean up while I was leading the country in bases on balls. In my eagerness to hit, I flailed at balls out of the strike zone. Despite my struggles, we won our first 12 games. Leanna and Brusque were a potent 1-2 punch. Our catcher, Jimmy May, called a solid game and a hit, too. Donalds was crushing the ball. We were starting to believe in ourselves, but my frustration was showing. During a game at Santa Clara University, we were up by a dozen runs late in the game, ahead of the count, 2-0. I chased an outside pitch and popped up to short. When I arrived back at the dugout, Snow called the entire team together. Our mood was upbeat because we were way ahead, our perfect record intact. So it shocked everyone when Snow walked right up to me, turned his hat around backward, and started screaming. "Bean, you selfish son of a bitch," he said, spitting every word in my face. "If you ever do that in a game again, you'll be watching the rest of it from the bullpen. This isn't about you, it's about the team. You've got to let the game come to you." I was embarrassed, but taking my medicine like a man, I nodded as he yelled expletives. As I walked out to center field in the bottom half of the inning, I could still feel the intensity of his dressing down. I also realized the coach was right. I was being selfish. It was one of the hardest but best lessons a coach had ever imparted to me. Snow was sending another message as well. No one was exempt from his rage. "Wow," I heard the younger guys saying. "Did you hear what Coach said to Beaner? This guy is fucking crazy." Taking me aside later, Snow took a kinder approach. "Give the scouts some credit," he told me. "They know what's going on. They will be impressed the teams don't want to give you anything in the strike zone." Remembering what had gotten me to this point, I stopped worrying about statistics and played hard. I regained my patience at the plate, breaking the school record for walks, 85, 60 games. When I did get a good pitch, I usually hit it hard. Before long, we were ranked number 1 in the nation, winning 26 of 27 games. In the Western Regional Playoffs, we defeated UC Santa Barbara, UCLA twice, and then knocked off Hawaii to earn a trip to the College World Series in Omaha. ESPN televised the first game against Louisiana State, which featured right fielder Albert Bell, pitching standouts and future big leaguers Ben McDonald and Mark Guthrie. With the game knotted 3-3 in the ninth, Louisiana brought in the lefty Guthrie to match up against the two lefties, Donalds and me. The strategy backfired when I led off with a double. Chris drove me in with another sharp double, giving us a 4-3 win. Next up was national powerhouse Oklahoma State. With Leanna hurling a masterpiece, we were up 7-1 when it began to pour. After an hour, the umpires sent us back out onto the field. Out of rhythm, Tim walked the first hitter and allowed a bloop single. He whiffed the next batter for the first out. The following hitter tapped a weak ground ball at Donalds at third. Slippery from the rain, the ball squirted out of his usually reliable hands for an error. It should have been an inning-ending double play. Now the bases were loaded with one out. Tim gave up a double down the left field, and suddenly the score was 7-4. The rain resumed and play was suspended until the next afternoon. Tim had thrown well over 100 pitches and would be unavailable. Play started with two runners on, one out, and the score 7-4. Oklahoma beat up on a succession of pitchers, and we lost 9-7. Deflated by press, deflated by blowing a big lead with our best pitcher on the mound, we started to press, losing the next game to eventual champion Arizona 4-3. Boasting future big leaguers Trevor Hoffman and JT Snow, Arizona was the better team. Stupidly, the Major League Draft is held during the College World Series, placing even more pressure on guys who are ready to turn pro. It was bittersweet when Tim and I were both drafted by storied franchises. The Yanks, who'd gone another direction after my injury, drafted Tim in the second round, while I was the third player chosen by the Detroit Tigers, 2 spots ahead of Bo Jackson. On a sunny fall day my senior year, I spotted a young woman skateboarding across campus. My eyes followed her as she sped past, reminding me of an old RC Cola commercial in which a girl riding a skateboard down the sidewalk while singing a silly jingle. A wild bird, I thought. Catching my eye, she flashed a big grin. I had seen this pretty girl on campus from time to time, but I didn't even know her name. As I returned to my room after dinner one night, there she was, sitting on my bed, studying with my roommate, Brusque. It turned out he had a class with her. With her $1 million smile, Anna Marie Amato was my image of the classic beach girl. I loved her carefree attitude and flirtatiousness, which seemed a relief from my own relentless, overachieving perfectionism. Her indifference inflamed my desire, and suddenly I was the one pushing for more. Anna surfed, could dash off a 10-mile run like a walk in the park, and starred at varsity soccer for Loyola. I remember watching her kick a goal against a great USC team, then get into a fight with the defender she'd already beaten. I was impressed, but I still wasn't sure whether going out with Anna was what I thought I should do or what I truly wanted. I decided that a baseball star should have a certain kind of girlfriend, and she fit the image I created. Whatever my motive, I fell hard. For the first time, a romantic attachment did not distract me on the field. It was nice to finally find inspiration outside myself, a role Anna was happy to fill. Yet, even as we developed an intense sexual bond, it dawned on me that I didn't share my teammates' intense attraction to the opposite sex. There was always something missing, and I felt restless, couldn't quite define or shake. At the same time, I couldn't fathom the alternative. It wasn't long before I got a major clue. As the team was looking forward to the series that spring, I began suffering hamstring problems in my right leg, an injury that would become chronic over the years. After one road game in Northern California, I worried I might pull or even tear it, as I had in my junior year. I wasn't going to let that spoil my shot at the pros again, so as a precaution, I went to speak to one of the opposing team's trainers. The relationship between trainers and athletes is extraordinarily intimate. They are forever bandaging scrapes, massaging right muscles, taping ankles, and flushing dust from eyeballs. Athletes think nothing of running around naked. There's a very fine line separating the professional work of a trainer or coach and personal space that can be easily violated. The physical proximity and dependence on medical judgment make trust absolute. After a hot shower, I lay face down on the trainer's table with a towel around my waist while he wrapped a bag of ice around my leg. He was carrying on a conversation with someone else, on one of the many other training tables, which had barriers between them. Music was blaring, TVs were showing sports, and there was the usual commotion of a Division I training facility. As he massaged the kinks in my hamstring, I felt his hands inch toward my thigh. He was treating me all right, but in a way that's not usually considered therapeutic. Closing my eyes, I pretended nothing was happening, but the furtiveness of this spontaneous act was intoxicating. The hidden physical evidence of my excitement made it clear I wasn't objecting. I walked back to the locker room in a daze. Had I really just allowed a strange man to touch me? In public, no less? I reminded myself that I hadn't reciprocated. I vowed never to let it happen again. I blamed him and went running back to Anna. I made love to her with special vigor the next time we were together, then fell into a post-coital slumber, reasonably assured of my normalcy. And that ends part one, Going the Other Way by Billy Bean. Come back next time when we'll get into part two and chapter 4, when we'll hear Billy Bean in the chapter entitled The Bushes say, everyone was pretty leery of me the day I walked through the clubhouse door of the Glen Falls Tigers in June 1986. I'd been drafted in the 4th round by the Detroit Tigers. No big deal. My $20,000 upfront money hardly qualified me as a bonus baby, even in those relatively modest times. But the Tigers had enough confidence in my ability and maturity to send me directly from college to AA ball, skipping rookie league and single A, highly unusual move. We'll pick up there next time. Thanks for watching. Take care.